Welcome to our weekly discussion of current affairs. We call it Moral Side of the News, and we're glad you're alongside this week. And especially this week, we recognize and give thanks to all our veterans who have served. Joining me, as always, is a distinguished panel: Dr. Marian Taylor, South Frankfort Presbyterian Church; Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary; Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School; and Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville. Welcome, panel. Our first topic today: COVID vaccination top our news again this week, including the fact that youngsters are now getting immunized. On the work front, vaccination mandates are now under the microscope. Norton Healthcare has already implemented a vaccine mandate. Other large employers in this region, including GE Appliances, Ford, UPS, and LG&E, are reviewing the rules. And perhaps by January, Louisville's police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and other workers could be required to be fully vaccinated or face weekly testing. So let's turn to our panel on Moral Side of the News. Let's hear your thoughts about vaccination mandates and employment.
For the life of me, I don't understand why anyone would be fighting vaccination. It could be a matter of life and death. And to tell you the truth, I've been vaccinated with the 2 shots and the booster, but we still don't know what variant is out there. And I don't think I would really be interested in interfacing with a public servant, to wit, let's say, an EMS person. If I'm on a gurney somewhere and they're dealing with me and they haven't been vaccinated, I think that's unfair to all concerned. And I'm a bit puzzled by people who are refusing vaccination from a religious perspective, because the religion that I choose to practice in the book of Deuteronomy says unequivocally, Bacharta b'chaim, choose life so that you and your descendants live.
I think I agree with you, Stan. It's still a little confusing to me. I can understand where we need to raise questions and all that kind of stuff from the scientists, but I do give the scientists the benefit of the doubt, because they've spent their life studying it, just like we've studied for our professions as well. And I guess the 2 points for me is always in our Jewish Christian tradition, the common good. That, I do things for the good, not just of myself. So freedom is not just about one person, it's about freedom for all of us. But it's also that I sometimes do things to make sure that the common good that everybody is raised. And I guess as a Christian, it's, well, and a Jew could say the same thing. Love God, love neighbor. Part of loving God is loving neighbor. It's that simple to me. And I guess I'm a simpleton somewhere. I don't understand the arguments, as you said, Stan.
Well, yeah, one of the puzzling things is, after a century in which labor unions fought for workplace safety, that this is what they advocated for, and we slowly and painfully developed all kinds of rules and regulations about safety in the workplace. If somebody breaks a jar in the Kroger aisle, they are required to put little guards around it and clean it up right away. So there's a whole history of that was really driven by the labor movement. So the most puzzling thing to me right now is that there are organized labor groups questioning these public safety measures that are intended to protect them. I think, as I understand the science of it, people who've been vaccinated, while it's possible to have a breakthrough infection, are much less likely to shed large amounts of the virus and therefore are less dangerous to their compadres, at work. And we all still have to be concerned about more vulnerable people that we interact with in the course of our days that we might really harm if we shed virus in their direction and their presence. So I am kind of puzzled by all this and feel as though something's kind of gone wrong in our culture. That somehow we've lost a kind of self-discipline and a kind of vision for the common good. The Shelbyville newspaper published a 1918 article recently about the community's response to that flu epidemic. And they authorized the public health doctor to do things like put a sign on people's front doors, their homes, to indicate that it was a home in which there was an infection, that people were required to stay home, and the police were empowered to make sure that they didn't flaunt that. The head of household could be subject to a stiff fine if they were not obeying all of this. So this idea that public epidemics are an emergency that requires special measures, this isn't new at all. Not the least bit. It's more than 100 years old. So to me, there's something that comes across like spoiled brats about this reaction. And I'm sorry to put it that strongly, but it just comes across that way.
But we have precedents in so many different ways of public health efforts. And my wonderment about those that have such vehement objection to the COVID-19 vaccination is what you're going to do about MMR vaccinations for kids in schools. You're still doing that. That's still required. Diphtheria,
polio
are still required. Polio vaccinations are still required. And no one is arguing that. And I'm hoping that that argument, that vacuous argument, doesn't move over into continually creating more danger for our kids that are in school. This is what we get in a nation that continues to push the politicization of everything. When everything becomes politicized, everything's become an issue about a political cycle. We put persons in danger. This debate has over 700,000 people dead in our country. And it is to the shame of our nation that we continue to place individual liberty arguments over the broad safety concern of the community. And I agree with everyone that has spoken on this panel. It's very interesting that those persons who start out making this libertarian argument, when they become sick with COVID, wants to all of a sudden get the shot and all of a sudden wants to try to have some type of medical emergence to themselves, which undergirds the spiritual emptiness of that position. Is that the goal of those stances and arguments is individual. We've become such an individual focused community and nation that we've trashed our common concern for knowing that I'm healthy when my neighbor is healthy. I'm safe when my neighbor is safe. And I think that we need to do whatever we can to push against those types of forces that push against more libertarianism.
Kilen, I take it with I want to take what you said and move on it, and also something Joe mentioned. When that libertarian person who is talking about rugged individualism comes down with COVID and gets the shot, my reaction is twofold. First, thank God. Second, what took you so long?
Yeah.
Joe, you mentioned science and scientists. I believe that the work of scientists, the work of medical researchers, is in fact God's work. Because I believe that these people, I believe it is God's will to cure. I believe that it is God's will to heal. And I think that God is moving through the hearts and minds and hands of those people. People like Dr. Fauci, people like Dr. Stephen Stack in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and doing God's will to bring us to safety, to rescue us.
I really agree with that. And I guess part of it is, I believe as a American, as a Christian religious, that God wants us to have freedom, but freedom is never an absolute right if it interferes with someone else, or they're good. And so there has to always be a balance. And somehow, as Kilen has said, we've lost that sense of balance, and which really disturbs me in many ways. As you have said, some of you know, I've been in the hospital for 10 days in the last month, and thank God. I just amazed at the doctors and the machines that I went through, and all that kind of stuff, and how much better I feel today than I did a few weeks ago. And it's like, the last couple of days, just like, thank God for medicine, and thank God for the people that I have been blessed. Thank God for insurance. Thanks God for all that kind of stuff. And I said, it's amazing. And now how can I not trust those people? Look where they've got me. And I guess we're in an age where we don't trust anybody. I don't know where all that's coming from. It still mystifies me.
And I have to have full disclosure with this conversation, because part of my responsibility here at Louisville Seminary is to execute our COVID-19 policy. And we do have a mandatory vaccination policy for our students and our staff. And so we're executing that. So that's a big deal for me. It's a daily experience for us. We are here at Louisville Seminary, we're over 98% of our community members vaccinated, and we're constantly communicating with those who have not yet sent their confirmations yet. But we're on a big, most of us, if not all of us, have both had both vaccinations, and there's a growing number of those within our community that are getting their boosters as well.
Kilen, not to quibble, but couldn't you use a better verb than executing? How about facilitating?
Implementing.
Yes, implementing.
Point well taken. Point well taken.
Well, I want to say to Joe, I'm so glad that you're doing better, and we'll keep you in our prayers. I hadn't been aware that you had been in the hospital. And I also just want to pick up, because a couple of things that each of you have said kind of hinted at how the United States stacks up internationally on this issue.
Yes.
And I do think one of the reasons people have admired the United States is that kind of bumptious ferment that comes with individual liberties. But I think the whole world can see that it's gone a little far, that we are out of balance, that the other side of the equation is the sense of the public good and the care for the larger society. And so I think we've lost some prestige and respect in the world, because other cultures and other countries have a stronger feeling of respect for the public good than we are demonstrating right now. It's okay. I think they'll forgive us, but it has been embarrassing. I think it has made us come down in the esteem of the international community.
All right, panel, we'll move on to our second topic on moral side of the news this week. To legalize or not to legalize, that is the question in Kentucky, just one of 14 states without legalized medical marijuana. The main sponsor of legislation to change that is confident the new year will bring the vote he wants. Representative Jason Nemes, a Republican from Louisville, says, quote, I would say we have a better chance now than we've ever had. So, panel on moral side of the news, your thoughts on medical marijuana and its use in Kentucky?
Well, I'm going to just jump in quickly to say that I've been watching an amazing documentary series on Hulu about the opioid epidemic. And I just, it's extremely sobering, the extent to which campaigns to legalize and use and spread the use and amplify the possible uses of a drug can be engineered by people who don't necessarily have everyone's health interest at stake or at heart. So I just want to say thank God for Whitney Westerfield and anyone else in Frankfort who's taking this slowly and carefully, looking in great detail at all the wording of possible legislation, combing through all the scientific information. That's what we need, because we do not need another stampede here. Some people might say, what do you mean stampede? You know, we've been slower than other states. That's all right. We've been more harmed than other states by the opioid epidemic, and we need to have learned our lesson and go very slowly with this.
I would agree with you, Marian, 1,000%. I've unfortunately, like maybe some of you, probably have dealt with, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 families in the last 18 months, 2 years, who've lost 20-somethings to opioids. And scares the living crap out of me. I'm sorry to use that language. I talked to a lot of police officers, and they said it's one of the number one problems that we've got in our city, and it never is quite raised to the surface of that. And I'm not sophisticated enough to know how opioids relate to marijuana. Obviously, I know many good people that have the medical use of marijuana has been very helpful to them. I would want to encourage that. I would encourage doctors to give us the best advice about that. But I say I never want to rush into anything that's dealing with drugs these days too fast.
I would definitely concur, but I'd like to caution our conversation around this, especially with the ways that legislators tend to look at issues like this without really having a good view of the history of how we tend to criminalize certain types of chemicals. Now, my wife and I, we own a counseling center. We do drug and alcohol counseling as part of our work. And yes, there is a vast chemical difference between opioids and marijuana. And there has been proven use of medicinal purposes for CBD oils and other types of hemp-based products that have been beneficial for a lot of people. I do appreciate the slow pace that we're taking to look at this, but I would also encourage us to, and I would love to see that documentary, Marian, that you're talking about, but there's some other information in documentaries that talks about how marijuana became an immoral drug from the get-go. There's questionable history around that. And no one likes to talk about that because the assumption of it is that there's a moral situation with drug use altogether. It's part of the criminalization of drug use that we really need to take a good look at, because it hampers families from being able to understand it as a mental health issue, or a health issue becomes a criminal issue and not a health issue. And it exacerbates our ability to help people, particularly who choose to self-medicate because of other types of emotional disturbances or emotional issues that they're going through. We don't have time for that conversation in this conversation. And it looks like the legislators don't have enough time to even take a good look at how we historically have criminalized drug use. And that criminalization tends to always land on the laps and the front porches of people of color in our country.
With the decriminalization, with the legalization of medical marijuana, once again, I think it's a good thing because this isn't, if the bill passes, it's not going to happen in a vacuum. With decriminalization, with legalization, come strict governmental controls, which means that hopefully the medical marijuana that comes available will be used exclusively for the purpose that it is meant, and that is to alleviate or minimalize pain.
Right, pain, nausea, and epileptic fits. There are a number of uses that have been, as Kilen says, proven to be helpful. And I don't want to withhold anything that would really help people who are suffering like that. So I didn't mean to come on that strong. I just I appreciate pushing back a little bit whenever we're feeling kind of rushed, and I'm glad that we're being careful.
Well, I really am sensitive to this conversation only because any conversation about drugs, alcohol, drug policy, enforcement of drug policy has a detrimental impact on the Black community and brown communities in our country. And so when we have these conversations, the assumption of criminalization tends to point directly and connect directly with our nation's racial past. And so I'm interested in seeing where that conversation is coming at. It doesn't sound like that's being part of the conversation. The other flip side of that is that when this country begins to see the economic benefit of anything that has not been benefited, where the benefit has not happened in the past, we race toward that. But I'm glad for the slow pace, but I think about those persons with chronic pain on a daily basis who have found, because they have been prescribed by their physicians to the use of medicinal marijuana, we should not be withholding that ability for people to have an additional tool in the toolbox for their health and for the alleviation of pain.
Kilen, I would agree with you wholeheartedly, certainly about the Black community and the whole question of drugs there. I guess my perspective is obviously more actually from the white community and young white, young adults who experiment in all different kind of ways, and it's caused death. And I know families that are grieving and mothers that are grieving enormously because their kids made mistakes. And that's how to balance all of that. You know, that's our question. Moral balance.
Yeah.
Okay, panel, we're going to close on a lighter note in this program, Moral Side of the News. The weather sure took a change this week toward chilly, and an Irvington, Kentucky family says we should get ready for a rough winter. Dick Freimeyer died in 2013, but his family continues his tradition of using a Japanese elm tree and a special secret formula to predict winter weather for the coming year. They say we need to have our shovels ready, especially for a major snowstorm in January. All right, panel, let's turn to you. What secret formula do you use, and are you going to run out and buy a snowblower? Who'd like to start with that?
I am not going to run out and get a snowblower. I don't have any secret formula, but let it snow. If the snow comes, let it snow. I'm ready for my shovel. I've got my stuff ready. I've got the salt ready to throw out on the driveway. I hope that the Japanese fig tree or what tree is true, but even if it's not, I love snow as long as it goes away fast.
I love snow, ice not so much, but I just want to point something out. Whenever I buy a four-wheel drive vehicle, for the years that I own the four-wheel drive vehicle, no snow. Very little snow. The year after I sell the four-wheel drive vehicle that I have a two-wheel drive vehicle, lots and lots of snow and ice and freezing rain.
So we have to ask, what do you have now?
What you driving, man? What you driving?
A four-wheel drive vehicle, so
That's wonderful.
I think I'm going to try to find a way to go on vacation somewhere between January 10th and February 8th. Someplace I need to go somewhere, visit some friend in California, I think.
I think you do. I come at this a little differently than most people because I have about 20 bonsai trees, and 7 of them need to winter outdoors. But a plant that grows in a pot is much more vulnerable to its roots freezing. So I have already gone through my annual ritual of burying my bonsai pots with lots of mulch piled up around them in a kind of wind-protected corner of my house on the outside. And then I've got another one that has to live in the garage all winter. And then I've got the tropical ones that have to live in a grow room all winter. So I've already gone through my winter transition and I'm ready for whatever. My trees are safe. That's what matters to me.
Now I happen to own,
God will bless us in whatever way God sees fit.
There you go.
I happen to own a snowblower, so I am prepared. But does anyone else own a snowblower on the panel?
No.
I need to get one.
Can we borrow yours there?
I'll come by.
Yeah, I definitely
January
need to
10th.
get one.
I've got the bags of salt in the garage, though. I'm ready for at least that much.
Well, it's always fun to talk about winter, no matter what's happening, and it'll be here before we know it. And based
That's
on the
right.
change this week, it's on its way.
So
That'll bring to a
like
close.
Monday afternoon,
What's that? Say again.
like Monday afternoon.
That's right. We'll be ready for it. But again, we want to say Happy Veterans Day to all our veterans who served our country in whatever capacity over the decades, and we're grateful for their service and our freedom. I want to thank our panel today, Marian Taylor, Kilen Gray, Stan Miles, and Joe Graffis. If you'd like to catch this program again, it's available on YouTube. Just jump on YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. And Moral Side is now a podcast. Just search for it wherever you get your podcast. Thank you, panel. We'll be back again next week with another edition of our program. So long for now. It's never too early to consider a tax-deductible year-end donation to the WHAS Crusade for Children. Just go to WHAScrusade.org, WHAScrusade.org to donate securely online. You can also mail your donation to WHAS Crusade for Children, 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. That's WHAS Crusade for Children, 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. If you have an Alexa device, just say, Alexa, donate to the Crusade for Children, and she'll talk you through it step by step. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Moral Side of the News. We'll be back again next week with an all-new conversation. So long till next time.